The legacy of Lance Armstrong. Next. And welcome to the Stan Simpson Show, a program about Connecticut people and compelling issues, making a point to drop in every week. Cycling legend Lance Armstrong has been stripped of his 7 Tour de France wins and has been banned for life from the sport he once dominated. This is his punishment for refusing to answer the allegations from the U.S. anti-doping agency that he used illegal performance-enhancing drugs while competing. Armstrong has denied the allegations, calling the case against him a witch hunt. But what happens now to the legacy of the remarkable man, a cancer survivor who has helped to raise almost $500 million to his foundation? We have Scott Gray from WTIC AM to stop in for a chat. Then we'll wrap things up, folks, with some political chatter as the election season heats up. The current Chris Keating, Arthur O'Neill, state rep, and Bilal Sakou, a regular contributor, give us their thoughts. But first, we're here with a 6-time Connecticut Sportscaster of the Year. Things are heating up for you, Scott Gray, WTIC AM. You got football going on, you got baseball heating up, and then you got the specter of Lance Armstrong, maybe the greatest cyclist of all time, being banned for life.
We've already had the first UConn football game of the season. Can you believe it?
That's right.
You're right. Things are heating up.
How do they look, by the way?
I think this is going to be a very good year for them. I think that Paul Pasqualoni going into the season, having a quarterback firmly in place, a starting quarterback with some good depth at the position and some experience at wide receiver, and I think good mix of running and passing game. I think they're going to be fine. And good senior leadership. They have 15 very solid seniors. Yeah.
But we digress. Right?
We digress.
We're here to talk about Lance Armstrong.
This is one of the more interesting stories in sports in a long time, because of all the layers that are involved here. Now, like you say, he's been stripped of 7 Tour de France titles. That's only partially correct. The USADA, U.S. Anti-Doping Agency, has stripped him of his 7 titles. But the interesting thing is the International Cycling Union has not. In their eyes, at this point anyway, he's still the 7-time Tour de France champion. And even more interesting, when I talk about a lot of layers, the ASU, the Amori Sports Organization, which is the actual body that actually runs the Tour de France, hasn't even checked in on this at all. They have done nothing to strip him of his titles. They have not commented in any way at this point on the action by the USADA. And in terms of Armstrong's legacy, how the public views him, it's interesting to me that the overwhelming majority of the public still views him as a 7-time Tour de France winner. And the overwhelming majority of the public seems to agree with him that he's been the victim of a witch hunt.
Interesting. Now, listen, he may be the 7-time winner, but the question still is, was he dirty? There were allegations for years about this. We also know that cycling is a sport that is where doping is pervasive. A lot of champions have come up dirty. Why is it so hard to believe that he was dirty? Why are folks struggling with that whole notion that he did this?
Stan, the simple reason why it's so difficult for people to believe this, number one, obviously people don't want to believe it, because there's, when you get into all the layers of this story, we're talking about Stan, not you, Stan, we're talking about Lance Armstrong, the cyclist. But there's Lance Armstrong, the humanitarian, and this is the guy that people don't want to think ill of. His Live Strong Foundation, he's raised over $500 million in various ways for cancer research.
Which doesn't mean he didn't cheat to win those Tour de France's, right? He could be a great guy raising money, and I think it's fascinating to me. Someone's the Roger Clemens syndrome at first when he was going through his issue. Folks didn't want to believe that, then things change. I'm fascinated by folks who struggle to think it's implausible that this guy in a sport that is so pervasive with doping couldn't have been doping himself when his own teammates rolled on him.
There are some big differences. There are parallels, obviously. You talk about Lance Armstrong and Roger Clemens. Roger Clemens never tested positive for any performance-enhancing substance.
Right, but then the counter to that is, though, if you're using the good designer drugs, you can say
Right.
that all day long.
Right.
If you're not testing for the right thing,
Right.
they're going to come out positive.
But the difference is, Roger Clemens was never tested the way Lance Armstrong was tested. He's been tested over 500 times, Stanley.
So why would
and
his
never
teammates,
came up positive.
why would they're claiming, the U.S. doping agency's claiming that their evidence includes at least 10 people,
Right.
those who were even teammates of his, including Landis, the guy who won the Tour de France, Floyd Landis, right?
Right.
He wins the Tour de France in 2006. He turns up dirty.
Right.
First he says, oh, I'm not dirty, then concedes, yes, I did cheat, and oh, by the way, Lance did too. Why would so many of his colleagues, including doctors, say, yes, Lance was involved in this?
Okay, number one, I'm not here to defend Lance Armstrong. I'm here to discuss the situation.
But that's my sort of counter.
But there is also the theory or the school of thought that if a guy like a Floyd Landis and other teammates get caught, and they think Armstrong's as dirty as they are, and he didn't get caught, then they're going to be prone to turning him in. They're going to be prone to testifying against him. And this is basically what the USADA has been pressing its case against Armstrong on, is based on testimony and hearsay from some of his teammates.
And a la Roger Clemens, when Andy Pettit said he heard that it didn't get into court, but Pettit had evidence where he said he heard
somebody told him, or Clemens said something that made him believe.
I guess, you know, Romney, I mean, I've always suspected, and I guess this is where we're having our little back and forth. I mean, it's no surprise to me, because when you study racing, I mean, bike racing has been dirty. And it's hard for me to believe that he would not be dirty after all the allegations.
Stop and think about it, Stanley. You get on a bike and you race 100 to 150 miles a day for 3 weeks, and you're going up the Pyrenees, and some of these are like 100-mile sprints. You kind of say to yourself, is a human being really capable of doing this? So you would suspect, you're absolutely right, it's not hard for you to cross that line and say, these guys got to be using something to help them do that. Not just Lance Armstrong, but everybody.
But don't forget the money factor, too. With this group he was with, the U.S. Postal Service bike team, they generated $40 million in sponsorships. So there's certainly a motive. If you want to say, what's the motive to do this? There's a lot of money involved in this.
There's a lot of money, not just for the U.S. Postal Service and the team, but certainly in endorsements for anybody who succeeds in this sport or any sport. And if, let's face it, if Armstrong's, if it stands that he's stripped of his titles, we have one American then who's ever won the Tour de France. That would be Greg LeMond.
We've got 30 seconds. I mean, think about it. Baseball, football, boxing, track and field. I mean, there's not a sport you can mention right now on the Olympic level that hasn't been tainted with the issue of performance-enhancing drugs.
The one thing that bothers me, the one danger I see, is people saying, well, hey, he gave up. He decided he wasn't going to fight it anymore. That's an admission of guilt. I don't view that as an admission of guilt. He'd been dogged by the USADA for a long time. Maybe financially he just couldn't afford to do it anymore. Maybe he's just tired of doing it. Let's get on with my life. Let's get on with the charity foundations that I'm involved in. I can't do this anymore.
We got to wrap up. See, I think he felt they had the goods on him, and rather than have this whole thing play out, he said, you know what, I'll take a pass and leave it as a jump ball of my legacy.
But then you'd still have two other organizations that aren't in agreement on this yet.
We should end the whole show in a second. Next time, how you back? Scott Gray, folks. When we come back, we'll talk about politics. The elections are heating up and shaking out with our political experts. We'll talk about what's next. We have the GOP convention going up. You have President Obama doing his thing. Local politics don't go away. Catch us on Facebook and Twitter, too.